Good evening, Your Excellencies, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Michelle Kidwell Gilbert, Chair of the Archaeology Committee of the National Arts Club. On behalf of President Dr. Tara Cortez, the Board of Governors, and the Archaeology Committee, I feel delighted to welcome tonight's audience to an extraordinary presentation by His Excellency Ambassador Mr. Andreas von Uexküll. It is a special privilege that the Deputy Permanent Representative of Sweden's mission to the United Nations in New York addresses us on the occasion of International Archaeology Day. The Archaeology Committee extends its sincerest respect to diplomats from China, Estonia, Finland, Georgia, Germany, Iceland, Norway, and Poland. May I request that you kindly stand, please. And if you want to move up here, please do so. As well as be joined by special guests from Egypt, Georgia again in Germany, Korea, Libya, Ukraine, and our own United States mission. We applaud your presence and sincerely commend your diligent efforts and desire for eternal peace. The Archaeology Committee involves diplomats and dignitaries whenever possible. Once a year, we commemorate International Archaeology Day, initiated in 2013 by the Archaeological Institute of America. It has been our custom to invite an esteemed ambassador to present. His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Palitha Kahona from Sri Lanka was first. His Excellency Ambassador Vladimir Drobnik from Croatia. His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Fatih Idris from Egypt. Her Excellency Ambassador Vanessa Fraser from Malta. His Excellency Ambassador Evangelist C. Sakarias from Greece, His Excellency Ambassador Michaelis Asferius, then Consul General from Cyprus, and last year, His Excellency Ambassador Jonathan Miller from Israel have all participated in the past. Speakers from assorted consulates have included Her Excellency Ambassador Kula Sapananu, then Consul General from Cyprus, and Czech Republic's the Honorable Consul Silva Pavlosova. Advance notice that two of these distinguished members of the international community return for live-streamed lectures with their recordings subsequently put on the National Arts Club website, as tonight's will be. So please do tell your friends who were ill. I know a number of the committee. I've caught something that's going around in New York. In around a month, they can enjoy this presentation. November 25th at 12 p.m. It's an online program with Ambassador Dr. Palitha T.B. Kahona of Sri Lanka to the United Nations, as well as to the People's Republic of China, entitled Lanka, the crucial hub of the ancient maritime Silk Road, as well as March 3rd at 3 p.m., an online program with Silva Pavlosova, head of the Maastricht unit of the Middle East Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic, and her talk is entitled Across Jordan in the Footsteps of Rus Musal, Archaeology and Discovery. Before Ambassador von Uexküll speaks, permit me, as is my custom, some remarks concerning what I deem to be archaeology's prime contributions. Archaeology as a discipline possesses the potential to enthrall and offers a global perspective on complex issues. Its broad thrust seems ideally suited to demonstrate humankind's shared nature, interlocking heritage, commonalities, and interwoven destiny. The exhilaration connected with excavations and glorious discoveries oftentimes rewriting intellectual history, exerts a mesmerizing spell. To understand the past is to enhance the present and anticipate the future. To understand the past in all its manifold variety is to acknowledge the unity amongst people. To understand the past is to confront life fully, profoundly, joyously. The wish for this happiness to thrive implies that one must pursue peaceful missions. Archaeology concerns not only today and tomorrow, but altering perceptions for an improved future. Our committee wishes to forge a new reality in which freedom can flourish and refuses to validate limitations while acknowledging that although we cannot complete the task, neither are we free to desist from trying. We should devise new modes of thinking to lower the tenor of discourse while not denying historical facts, find areas for collaboration, assert what binds us, comprehend differences and the right to exist, and never, never lose that yearning for peace. So let us contemplate our interconnections rather than what separates us. Archaeology affirms these laudatory aims. Believing in the ethical responsibility to impart knowledge and exalting disparate traditions, the Archaeology Committee presents a series of lectures which affirm our shared humanity, leading to empathy and respect for others. Our members, united by their palpable love for art, for we have been waylaid by beauty, come from varying circumstances, but are bonded by the belief that if I am only for myself, who am I? Let us remember that wherever conflicts within our human family overshadow togetherness. For context, the United States joined the United Nations on October 24, 1945, the date of the UN Charter's ratification. A scant year later, on November 19, 1946, along with Afghanistan and its fellow Baltic nation Iceland, Sweden joined the UN. It is the homeland of Dag Hammarskjöld, the second Secretary General, who served from 1953 until his death in 1961 in a plane crash while on a peace mission in the Congo. Ambassador von Uexküll is a renowned Swedish diplomat who, prior to his current appointment as Deputy Permanent Representative, served at the Swedish Mission for Foreign Affairs as Deputy Head of the Department for Asia, Pacific, and Latin America. Ambassador to Somalia and the Arctic Council, he previously was posted as the head of the section for trade and economy at the Swedish embassies in both Washington and Tallinn, a fitting complement to his chosen topic relating to the many benefits garnered through trade. With sincere gratitude, it is now my privilege to request that this extraordinary diplomat explores the topic of how trade has shaped integration, prosperity, and identity in Sweden and across the Baltic Sea regions. Ambassador von Uexküll, if you will, kindly address our audience.
So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Michelle, for putting me up there on the sky, for being this impressive diplomat. I don't know what my colleagues here think about that, but thank you so much. And also, it's such an honor to be here at the Archaeological Society and here at the beautiful National Museum of Arts. National Art Society, yeah. Anyway, First of all, I mean, for my UN colleagues to come here, I think it's a good time for us to maybe be somewhere else rather than negotiating tough UN resolutions. And hopefully we can find some common ground here when we discuss history. And don't feel afraid to chip in if I characterize your countries in a way that you don't really approve of, and that's perfectly fine. But I would also like to thank my dear wife, Marlena, who is actually born in Estonia, and we met when I was posted there in 2001. And I'm very honored that you are here as well, and I'm happy that I've been dwelling into details a lot this weekend, and you probably haven't recognized me. So finally tomorrow you will see old Andreas again. And also Åsa Forsgren, my dear colleague from the Swedish mission, who has been struggling with all these slides that I'm going to present for you. We'll see how many of them we will show, but thank you so much for all your efforts with that. Now, so to my first question, why discuss the story about Swedish trade in the Baltic? And when Michel contacted me this spring, we were in the midst of a very volatile situation in terms of possible tariffs coming here and there. We didn't really know where we were going to go. But clearly we understood that trade tariffs is a geopolitical tool in our globalized world. And coming from a country where foreign trade is about existence, really. I mean, Sweden, more than half of our GDP is dependent on how our companies are trading in the world. And also 30% of all the jobs in Sweden are actually directly related to trade. So this is very important for us. And when it's threatened, it's something that we need to, when we need to get there, be very much attentive. Now, in Sweden, the companies have learned how to maneuver in a situation where we actually trade with one another. And Swedish negotiators jokingly call themselves free trade fundamentalists because the companies are so much dependent on these global value chains. And here you see some of them that are active, and you probably recognize some of them, but I will not go through all of them. But IKEA, for instance, you have probably screwed some furniture. Bookshop Billy, Securitas is actually the largest company in the United States, employing almost 300,000 people. So it's quite a lot of companies there. Now, when I was working at the Swedish Embassy in Washington, D.C., we tried to persuade our friends in Washington to have this trade agreement with the European Union, and to be able to explain this to governors all over the United States. We provided this booklet where we calculated that Swedish companies and investments actually employed 380,000 people in the United States of America. And here in New York, actually 22,000 people are employed by Swedish companies here. And Sweden is one of the 10 largest foreign direct investors in the United States. Now, why is trade important? Well, basically it boils down to meetings between humans from different cultures. If we don't meet and exchange ideas, there is no innovation. And then societies will not develop nor survive. So things that we take for granted, like the clothes we wear, what we eat, is all related to trade. So I think it's worthwhile remembering. Now, and here's a picture of people meeting and innovating together from the old times. Now, if you look at trade, money, for instance, that's an innovation. It's an abstract principle that we have had to learn. This is a way how we can trade different goods with one another. And the first coin was founded in Lydia, 600 before Christ, BC, in western Turkey. And the Chinese, I'm so honored to have my Chinese colleague here, Geng here, the paper was invented around 100 AD. And this led to the printing of the first bills. And you see actually an example of a Chinese bill to the left there, which has been also very important. And then you see a picture of Phoenician tradesmen, and these were important. They needed some way to communicate how to calculate or counting their grain storage. And then they had to invent the alphabet. And that has also been very important in trade, to be able to write and agree with one another with documents. So this is also a very important innovation moving forward. And as you all know, when empires collapse, at one time they do, trade usually always continues. And one good example is when the Roman Empire collapsed, then the trade continued in the Malacca Strait with the spices that the Europeans needed. So that's something that also worth remembering. Now, Europe. I have understood that here at the Archaeological Society you have had a lot of lecturers from Mediterranean countries coming from here. This is the birth of Western civilization with the Greek culture, the Roman culture, etc. So this has been very important. What we haven't been speaking so much is about the Baltic Sea. And this is the other sea you see north. There you see the Swedish map. Going from east to the Atlantic, west, and that's the other sea is the Mediterranean Sea here on the lower part of the picture. So the Baltic Sea is 7 times smaller. It is in an area. Should I go up but you all see it and you understand where it is, yeah? Okay, good. It's a place that is cold. It's isolated, sparsely populated. A lot of forests, bad roads. So the interest in this place has probably been limited over time. But one person changed this. Tacitus. And he's the person who actually gave the first known description of who the Swedes are. And he did that in 98 AD. And that's not visibly Sweden, but he was actually in the Baltic. Because Baltic was more central in the way it was integrated in Europe. And when he was describing the Swedes back then, he told, he has written this in his Germania, that Swedes is a powerful tribe distinguished by unique, strong longships and men who highly appreciated wealth. They are ruled by one single king, but not allowed to have their own weapons, as the king is very afraid of being toppled. He also mentioned the Sami hunters, the indigenous people that live in Sweden, in the very north. But Swedes were also looked upon in the medieval times, that's way later on, as primitive people. And there is written proof that the Germans living in the Baltic Sea said that the Swedes, they called them the Stromfresser, or as a herringfresher, eaters. That means people that eat herring. So that's what Swedes were known for. And there's one story from 1143 when a monk in the French monastery in Clairvaux in France, he was ordered to move to a place called Albastra in Sweden, which is the first cloister in Sweden, and to lead that. And when he got this order, he fell into tears. And this is the place where he started his work as abbot of the abbey in Albastra, in mid-Sweden, you could say. I don't know, this is what this place looks like today. It looks like a very decent and nice place. I don't know why he complained. But he actually stayed there. He had to stay there for 50 years. And then he was allowed to move back to his beloved Clairvaux. Now, if we go back to the Baltic Sea and what we are going to discuss today, if you think about this very difficult place, cold and very isolated, how could we survive up there? And one of the main answers to that question is actually that we had the Baltic Sea. Because the Baltic Sea could help us to interact with one another via the rivers that going inland and also inland, and also having that sort of connection sea. And it brought diverse and isolated cultures together. And today we are speaking, I think, 7 languages in total around this Baltic Sea. We have Swedish, we have Finnish, we have Estonian, we have Latvian, we have Lithuanian, Russian, Polish, and German. And Danish. And then you have sort of covered all the countries around this place. But it's very important when you look at history that you shouldn't get caught in nation-state stereotyping. Because in history you've seen a lot of different types of peoples. I mean, we had Leaves in today's Latvia, we had Karelians in southeast Finland, and we had Goths in south of Sweden, we have Swedes in one part. So many different sort of folk groups living around here. But now, this is the way the situation looks. So how did Swedes become friends of free trade? So this is what I'm trying to explain to you today. And I'm going to actually try to go as far as I can in a long history. And here you see where we're starting and where we're going to end up. And we'll see. I have around 40 minutes in total, but now we have only 30 minutes left, I guess. So we will have to speed up a little bit. So stay tuned. After the ice withdrew from the north and Sweden, that was around 13,000 years ago. And already then we see the first trace of humans in Sweden. And actually, still today, the land in Sweden still raises. As a recovery from the pressure of the ice. So the last 100 years, around 1 meter, it has raised. You see more effects of this in the north, less so in the south. And that's related to rising sea levels and the climate change. But that's the situation. So when you go back in Sweden 1,000 years ago, there was way more water. Here you see pictures of the first woman that was found, a skeleton 12,000 years ago. The Österröd woman. Sorry, that was 10,000 years ago, and that's in West Sweden. And she's the first skeleton that we know of from Sweden. And this is a picture of how she probably looked and the environment there and what it looked like. What we found before that was 12,000 years ago, the first flint stone tools. And here you see examples of this, the tools that people use for that. And you see the skeleton actually of the lady down there to the left. And so this is in the time of the Stone Age, which lasted from 12,000 years ago until 1,700 BC. 6,000 years ago, there was a dramatic change, because that's when the first farmers came to Sweden. And you see signs of more permanent settlements. Before, the people were basically collectors and hunters, and they had canoes to move around in the oceans. Then after the Stone Age comes the Bronze Age, and that lasts between 1,700 to 500 BC. And then you see more findings of bronze. That seems to be a fairly peaceful time. Migration, even though there's a lot of migration, you see mostly jewelry artifacts and family-related burial sites. And here are some of the examples of these artifacts from the Bronze Age. Then, after the Bronze Age, we had no copper time in Sweden, or copper age rather, because there are no copper finds really in these times. So that's the Iron Age, and that lasts between 500 BC and 1050 AD. And as you know, the Roman Empire was collapsing around 300 AD, and during this time on an island east of Sweden, Öland, you can see building of fortresses and actually some golden coins that are related to the Roman Empire. So there seems to be some sort of connection with warriors having served in the Roman army and then coming to Öland in Sweden to live, basically. Then, in the latter part of the Iron Age, we see the first archaeological discoveries of major trading systems. And when I show this to you, you might recognize that these are called rune stones. And basically, people cutting in messages or about historic events in these stones. And they are spread all over Sweden. And many of these rune stones are telling the stories of Vikings traveling to the Black Sea and the Caspian Ocean. And we have a representative of Norway and Iceland, and they come from very prominent Viking cultures. So I'm happy to see here. The difference between your Vikings and our Vikings is that we were looking east and you were looking west. I'm probably discovering the United States of America. And the Vikings, they have this sort of, we think that they are very violent and using a lot of trying to conquer other parts of the world, but they were actually tradesmen as well. So what they were trading was fur, animal skin, weapons, slaves, and amber, and with that they traded to get the luxury products as jewelry, combs, they had to trade with that, pottery, silk, clothes, glass, spices, and salt. But this made Sweden connect with the rest of Europe, the Roman Empire, the Turks, and also the Arabs. And this, here you see how the Vikings were moving via the rivers down to the Black Sea here, and then the Caspian Ocean here, and how they actually came around also to the Mediterranean Sea. And these connections were extremely important. And here is, traditional Viking ship, sort of national, exactly. Now I'm going to give you one example, and this is 42 Vikings that went on a trip, most likely from the river Mälaren, which is near Stockholm, on a trip and on two vessels that were built there in Mälaren in Sweden around 700. And they went to an island called Salme. And I have my Estonian colleague here as well, and you know this place in Saaremaa, the big island west of Estonia. And there these graves were found like in 2008 or so, 2010. And these Vikings, they met a very bloody death. And actually, the vessels that they were buried with are one of the oldest Viking ships that we know in Sweden. It was very unclear what the purpose of the trip was. Could be a diplomatic mission, it could be even tourism, or for trade purposes. And in that time, politics, military violence, and trade were all interlinked. Another example of a place which was important for trade, and that is Birka, which is west of Stockholm in the Mälaren region. And here you found many of the 260,000 coins that we have found in Sweden, really proving the very active trade that was ongoing. And you also see in Birka a lot of coins that were also found in Åbo, which is in Finland. And it shows that a lot of trade went on between the Finnish and the Swedes during this time. And you also see Baltic Finnish pottery and also 20 round convex Finnish brooches, which clearly show that women also moved here from Finland. So Sweden and Finland was unified with the archipelago between Stockholm and Åbo, you could say, and it was made the travel safe. And the Finnish name for Swedes is Ruotsi, and that comes from the word roden, which means oarsmen rowing. I couldn't pronounce it very well in Finnish, but anyway, so this is the reference point. And also the place Roslagen, which is around Stockholm area. But then something happened in 1060 to the year 1200. We see little proof of contacts between Swedes and Baltic Finns. The Swedes deepened their relationship instead with the people in Novgorod and the Kievan Rus, so today's Ukraine. And here, actually, Vikings established communities in the Ukrainian region. So you see how far the historical relationship goes between Sweden and Ukraine. And actually, they also intermarried. The Swedes were the Ukrainian leaders for over 100 years. And here you see Kiev, a picture in Ukraine back then. Yeah. And here you see, for a map, the Khmer. And they were, of course, in a very big area, and they had very good relations with Sweden back then. But also they were fighting as well. Now, let's move back to Sweden. After Birka, there was another town in the Stockholm archipelago, Stockholm sort of Mälaren, and that's Sigtuna. Here you see pictures of Sigtuna. And here you also saw a lot of pottery from northwestern Russia. And actually, in 1187, probably Karelian Vikings, also Finnish people basically, came there to burn down the whole city. And they did that because probably the Swedes were messing things up in terms of trade in Novgorod, in that sort of area. And the Karelians had very close relations with the people from Novgorod. Now, then comes a new time, and Swedes left their heathen beliefs and became Christianized. And also the Swedes themselves started crusades towards Finland and sort of conquered Finland, you could say. Here you see a picture of something related to, actually, I was asked to say something about my family. So I have tried to keep away from it, but I'll do it right now. So after the Vikings, the German merchants developed the old, well-rehearsed northern axis of European trade. And in 1185, they actually built their first sort of permanent trade center east of Daugava, on Daugava, the river going in Latvia. And this is actually the place. And as they also needed a church, that the first stone church was built there, and also a fort. And the fort is actually under the sea. This is the way it looks today. And they had to do that because they were attacked by the local people, the Leaves. And this is the way the first sort of stone fort with German merchants in the Baltic looked like. And here you see a stone that one of my relatives put that there. So the connection to my relative is basically that my forefather, 23 generations up, he was quite successful knight, and he was allowed to marry this daughter who had this place in 1229 around. So he actually then also took the name of this place, and that's why I'm called Uexküll. And they stayed in the Baltic for around 20 generations, but then they moved out in 1919 or so. So anyway, so now you know this. Lübeck. From Lübeck, and it's a picture of today, beautiful city. The Hanseatic League built a network around the Baltic Sea, and that connected all the individual shores of the Baltic. And this was a very successful trade system, and they were able to connect the production centers inland with these different cities that you will see here on this page. And you see it's a network going down to Bruges, basically, in today's Belgium, to Novgorod, up in the east here, and down to actually Lviv. You don't see it here on the map, but that's in Ukraine, on the border of Poland. A very successful network of trade. And the merchants in the system, they had knowledge of the Eastern languages and customs, and were able to follow supply and demand, and developed a structure that could bridge these long distances between these different places. The organization was not like the Italians did it, which was quite centralized. it was very decentralized, and it was inexpensive and reliable system. So there was a trust that was built in these different cities along the Baltic Sea. And the League, the Hanseatic League, had major political influence all over the Baltic Sea. And they were actually behind the union between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, Finland, between 1397 and 1523. They had two main routes. One was to go, put all the trade going down to Lübeck, and then over land to the city Hamburg from the end of the 1100s, and then you had access to the North Sea there, west of Denmark. The other route was to go between, you see Copenhagen, Malmö there, between Denmark and Sweden, and now directly to the ocean. The first version of trade was a little bit more expensive, but safer, because the cities, Lübeck and Hamburg, they controlled the passage. Whereas the trade via Denmark, between Denmark and Sweden, was less expensive, longer, but it was a very dangerous area, and it's called the graveyard of ships when you're coming up to that area, to the big open ocean. A lot of ships actually sank there. Anyway, we move forward here. Here's a picture of a newly built cog, and this is the way the ships basically looked like back then. And the navigation, they didn't have compass or so, they had to use the land signs, soldering, and avoid pirates, because there were also several pirates in the Baltic Sea. And transport from Tallinn to Lübeck could take between 4 weeks in summertime or 4 months during wintertime. So what did they trade? Well, the oldest known trading commodity was amber, and you see that in the middle here, the red stone there, and that was known since Roman time. Also Baltic herring, very important. And when Lübeck opened their Lüneburg salt production to the Baltic Sea, you see up in the left, you could actually conserve herring, and you could survive over Christmas time. So the connection between the salt and herring is extremely important. Other items was linen and hemp, and these, you see on the right here, they were used to build sails, because the vessels needed a lot of products to be able to move this trade forward. And then, of course, timber, which I don't see on the picture, but it's there. And grain down on the left side. Mainly barley and rye was produced. Then we move to also fur, wax, iron, and copper. There's a mix of iron and copper there to the left, which was big, of course, in Swedish production. And the fur, the thick fur, it was mainly squirrels from northwestern Russia that were very popular in Europe back then, because it was very thick. And up there you see the wax. And one wonders why they were doing wax. And that's because you could make candlelights out of it. And when you had the veneration of saints, this was a very important product. And also when sealing documents, for instance. And just to mention iron and copper, there's a mine in Falun that actually was started, the mining production, in 900 AD. And it went on actually production there until 1980s or so. So for 1,000 years there was mining going on in this mine. So it's quite a long history there. Other things, beer. Apparently during that time you were supposed to drink 4.5 liters of beer every day. And even also children had to do that, or did that, because it was a safe way of drinking, because of water, there were issues with that. Then wine, also wine production in Holstein, Lauenberg, and in later Prussia. The wine they blended with spices and honey. So I don't know how it tasted, but I think they liked it. And then also silk and spices was also very important in this trade. Then you see pictures of that there. And some, yeah, exactly. Now, the cities. The Hanseatic League were very good in building cities. And you see, to the left, you see Stockholm. And then you see this first row going down in Stockholm. And you see a painting of it, and then you see how it actually looks today in the middle row, and then how it looks from sort of above, from the sky. And the second city is Tallinn, or Reval, as I said, the Germans call it. And the third one is, no, sorry, the second one is Riga in Latvia, and the third one is Tallinn, Reval. And the fourth one is Lübeck. So they look very similar, that's the whole point. And this system worked out. And you had the guild hall, you had the church, and you had the sort of Rathaus, the city hall basically, in the center. So the amount of cities grew from the, in 1200 there were 38 Hanseatic cities. But in the 1200s it became 204. And it started with Riga in 1201, and Copenhagen was initiated in was founded in 1254, and Stockholm in 1250. All right. There was also, sorry, we have to go back. Religious and social and ethnological change. So German, Lower German became lingua franca in the whole area. And also Christianity, of course, which first came to Scandinavia in 850, and then to Lithuania. That was the last country, or last sort of part of that part that became Christian, and that was in 1385. So a very long process. But if you have the same religion, that also helps in terms of similar norms and easier to trade. Now, here is, I just want to mention that between 1350 and 1420, we had several pandemics in Europe and also in the Baltic Sea area. And they say around 2/3 of the population died, so horrific. In Sweden, Finland, there was slightly less than 1 million inhabitants in 1500, and in Estonia around 250,000 inhabitants, so 1/4 of the Swedish-Finnish population. And the Swedish population finally recovered before the pandemics in the 1680s or so, population-wise. So it took a long time to recover. But at the same time, this created opportunities in the 1400s. If you would like to have a startup in the history, I think you should go back to the 1400s, because the supply of jobs was enormous. A lot of people had died. Gutenberg, he invented the printing press. As nuns and monks had died, and then you could copy the literature and get out the information. And also, in this time, the trade with Russia became very lucrative. So then we move forward. In this time, also, when you move to the 1500s, the nation states become more prominent. And there became, this is when the Livonian, the Teutonic Order and the Hanseatic League basically eroded. Because they were not able to stand against the Russian Tsar coming from the east, the Russians, and the Swedes from the left, the west, and also Poland, Lithuania, and Denmark wanted to take control of the trade in the area. So here, what also happened is this union I told you about, the Swedish King Gustav Vasa unified Sweden around 1523, and here you see him entering Stockholm. And then I wanted to move to these two gentlemen. Of course, this was a power struggle between Sweden and Russia. And to the left you see John III, the Swedish king, back then in the 1580s. And there you see, as we say in Sweden, then Ivan the Terrible, the new Russian leader there. And apparently they were quarreling about the future wife. Ivan the Terrible thought that he would marry Katarina Jagiellonica, a very influential royal in Poland. But John III did not like that, so they were quarreling about that. and they were telling one another that they were raised from peasants and their family was not good enough, and so on and so forth. And actually, in the end of the day, John III married this Katarina Jagiellonica, but there was a very bad diplomatic relationship between our respective countries. Then we move ahead here. What I wanted to mention also is this is Öresund. This is the passage between Denmark on the left and Sweden on the right. And this was a very something that the Danish king used a lot, because all the trade had to pass through there, and he was very successful since the 1400s to bring in tariffs on this passage. And he could basically block the export of salt to Sweden, which was horrific for Sweden, because we needed the salt for our foods to be able to conserve our foods, including herring. What happened now is the Dutch are becoming very sort of influential in the trade, and they were very skillful vessel builders and very skillful in trade, and they still are. And they basically controlled a lot of the trade in the Baltic Sea back then. So here you see some pictures from Amsterdam, and especially trade between Danzig, Gdansk in northern Poland, and Amsterdam was very important, and also a lot of shipbuilding and so on. So we move forward to this gentleman, and this is Gustavus II Adolphus to the left, and then Axel Oxenstierna, his great chancellor. Why I show these pictures is that the way Sweden was run in the 1500s was basically a family business. Kings wanted to get, and queens wanted to get, a lot of money for their different activities. What Gustavus II Adolphus wanted to do was to build a modern state on a German model, because that was modern back then. And the Chancellor of State since 1612 to the right here, basically a sort of whole society approach to make Sweden great again. And he formed all these agencies in Sweden, be it the post sort of agency, be it to have all this what you call it, for National Board of Trade, for instance, I'm going to talk about it, and several other agencies that have a history from them. And also he was successful in building the cities. For instance, Gothenburg was formed there. It was sort of our only outpost towards west, which was formed then, and all the cities north of Stockholm. And the reason we had to do this organization was because other nations, like the Dutch, were controlling our trade. So this is what happened. Now, you mentioned to the left here, you see a copper coin, and it was 12 kilos heavy, and that was not very practical if you wanted to buy things, because we had a lack of silver. So that drove in the 30-year war that we put out our first bills, like the Chinese already did way earlier. But what happened in Sweden was that there was also trust on this bill. So the first banks were formed here in the 1600s. I just wanted to show that as well, which is important for trade. Yes. Then what happened is that the Swedish got a lot of good connections with the English. We wanted to move away from the dependence on the Dutch. Here you see the first trade agreement that was signed in 1654. Well, that's not the actual trade agreement, but symbols of Sweden and England. And that was very important. That was one of the first assignments of the National Board of Trade to sign that trade agreement. And basically what it meant there was that Sweden was allowed to control the trade of northwestern products, and we would not mess with the Scottish herring and such things. And here you see the British fleet that got a lot of influence. So England became very powerful in the Baltic Sea during this time. But that also meant that we looked west, and the Swedish colonies in history are not many, but in these times between 1638 to 1655, Sweden tried to control trade routes and to use them as strategic assets, though efforts to control them did not really succeed. And the Dutch took over Delaware. This is a picture from Delaware, which is around Wilmington, which is the first colony. And sorry, that was later on. And actually, the Wilmington's flag is a Swedish flag, and you see it up there to the left. Another colony we had in Cabo Corso in Ghana between 1650 and 1658. And unfortunately, their slave trade took place in a short time. And this is a picture of another colony in St. Barthélemy, today's St. Bart's in the Caribbean. That's way later, 1784 to 1878. So that was a fairly long time when we had that colony. That was given back to the French. Now we move ahead a little bit. Early 1700s. Charles XII tried to fight with the Russians, and he lost the Baltic provinces. And here you see a picture of Peter the Great. And this is a time when trade in the Baltic Sea went down a little bit for us, and the Russian conquest of the Baltic provinces made the Baltic provinces produce potato for the St. Petersburg people and other things. So we looked west instead, and here you see the treaty between the United States and Sweden, signed 1783, and it's called the Treaty of Amity and Commerce. And as Sweden was the first neutral state to sign such an agreement with the United States, we usually call ourselves the first neutral state to recognize the United States. So, and during this time, the National Board of Trade also had initiatives to make Sweden more self-sustainable. They tried to produce silk masks outside Stockholm, the Royal Palace, to provide silk for our production or sort of consumption, but not so successful. So we still have to rely on China for access to silk. Yeah, this is then in the early 1800s we lost Finland and to Russia. And here you see the island circle there called Åland. It has still today a very special status. If you travel with the boats, you can have free tax-free alcohol, I think, because of this special status. But this is a picture of Åland, which it's interesting because in that time, you know, the Crimea War in the 1850s, then Bolmarsund, this fort, was actually bombed by English Navy, because Russia and England were in war back then. So the Crimea War came to the Baltic Sea. That is the point I'm trying to make. And then this is an old classic picture of Europe. A lot of, the Vienna Congress in the early 1800s ran for until the First World War, but it was a very tense situation. But I think this picture is kind of interesting. And then you see end of 1800s the Swedish inventors that we're very proud of. You see Alfred Nobel, the second guy with a beard there, and you see dynamite. You see Tetra Pak here, Swedish invention. The seat belt, also a Swedish invention. So safety has always been important in Sweden. Now, I think I'm coming towards the end now. We're already about more than 40 minutes. I will not go through the First and Second World War. Of course, this affected trade in the Baltic Sea in a negative way. And especially after the Second World War in 1945, when we had the sort of the Iron Curtain. But in the 90s, after the Cold War and the Soviet dissolved, the import from Russia to Sweden increased from 0.8% in 2000 to 4.4% in 2013. So quite a big race. And then also exports came from 0.6% in 2000 to 2.1% in 2013. We tried to engage Russia in the different sort of regional organizations like the Council of Baltic Sea States, Barents Council, Arctic Council, but it hasn't quite worked right now. So, these are the flags of the European Union, where Sweden is a member, and since last year we're a member of NATO, and then of course United Nations, and this is the Nordic Council of Ministers, the 5 Nordic countries who are members of that. So this is very important for us to have this regional collaboration around the Baltic Sea, because it serves our interests well. So I think this is the way it looks now. And maybe I should stop there. Okay, thank you very much.
We have time for a few questions. We have time for 3 questions. Anyone have any questions in the room? Please raise your hand. All right. All yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This was absolutely remarkable. You gave us such an insight into the history of Sweden, its interrelationships with other nations as well, and how borders, in a sense, change. People go over, they come back. And I thought it was wonderful. It put so much into perspective and made me see the whole area quite differently. So I thank you, and let me thank you for all the audience here. And I want you to know, you had a quiet audience.
Yes.
Everyone was fascinated by what you had to say. Now is their opportunity. So, do we have some questions? Yes.
Can you share some information? I've been to Sweden. I've been to Sweden. I've been to Stockholm. And, I took the train to Copenhagen afterwards. But I was also in Gotland, and I toured the farms and the windmills and the caves that they have there. Can you share some of your knowledge about that? The Gotland Island?
Yeah, Gotland is it's the biggest island in Sweden, and of course strategically located. I mean, there's so much to say about Gotland. They speak very interesting Swedish there. It's sometimes hard to understand. But for instance, I showed you the picture of the first stone fort by the German merchants in Livonia. And actually, those stone forts and churches were built from stone from Gotland. So Gotland was a very important base for German merchants and trade in general, and especially Visby, since medieval times. And there are many, both big battles that have happened there, but also a lot of peaceful trade over the years. And Gotland is in the midst of the Baltic Sea and very strategically important for Sweden.
Thank you.
A wonderful special guest. Thank you.
Wonderful lecture, Andreas, thank you so much. And the question is, we live in such a very turbulent time when it comes to trade. The question is, what's the biggest challenge now for Sweden when it comes to trade?
But there are always challenges in trade. I mean, I would say for Sweden, our dependence on the single market within the European Union is key. I mean, the free flow of goods, of services, of people, and money, basically. And this is not a single market that is perfect and ready every day. This is something that you have to fight for all the time. And one example, when the pandemic suddenly came, we were struggling to even have the single market work. Did we get the medical equipment? It was stuck in the borders somewhere. And then suddenly the nations are looking inward. So that's one challenge, and the EU is key. But then, of course, we are also dependent to keep the trading relationship with the United States. I showed you all the investments we're doing and how we are dependent on US companies also investing in our country. But then it's the whole world. I mean, Asia is becoming very, very important. There you see the big population grow and a lot of innovation, and you have the big AI discussion and how we can be part of the technological developments. And usually we have been able to maneuver this with and be part of the global value chains. But when the global value chains, we need to also be ready to be strong in our respective nations and have production of all kinds of products. Yeah, something along those lines.
I'm very interested that you said the pandemic, because you spoke about the 14th century equivalent of a pandemic in your talk.
Yeah, no pandemic, and we have had it recently here. Then it was way worse. I mean, 2/3 of Europe basically died. We had another pandemic in the beginning of the 1700s, 1710 around there, 1709. A lot of people died then as well. So it takes a lot of time to recover from that. But I believe in vaccinations and science.
I'm going to just call upon someone who hasn't raised her hand, and that's a committee member who's from Norway. So, Irene?
Yes, I love it.
Question from you.
I don't really have any question. I want to thank you for really a wonderful talk and very interesting. So, thank you.
Yes. And I saw a hand over here. Yes.
Can I say something about Norway? Okay.
My question really is about Belt and Road and any connection of the northern countries connecting with Belt and Road in terms of transportation and trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think already the Vikings, as they were connecting to these areas in the Caspian Ocean, that's very close to the Belt and Silk Road. So in that way, but are you talking in present terms or the Belt and Road Initiative? Maybe I should ask my colleague Geng from the Chinese mission to answer. No, but this is something that is good for trading, and that's their own important transport channels to move forward. So I don't really have any opinions on that. Can I say something about Norway, which is interesting? Actually, Sweden has not fought a war since 1814. And the last war that we fought, that was against Norway. That sort of led to the union between Sweden and Norway, which lasted until 1905. But this is something that we are very blessed with not having had any wars since then, and it was quite a mild way, if I may put it that way. But just to put that into the picture.
Yes. We're going to have one more question. I've been signaled that time is almost over. Someone's pointing to someone, it'll be yours. But before that, let me say that when Polithica speaks online, he's going to be talking about the Chinese Silk Road, and the importance of Lanka for that. So that's about trade also. And it will be online if you can't hear it. There is a listing in back of the archaeology programs. Now, there was a question in back, and I'm coming. Are you the person? Yes. Oh, this man.
Okay. I was going to say there's somebody else who's trying to get first. All right, very quickly. Most of the trade that you displayed was of physical items moving in the past. In the current technological arena of trade, how do you see Sweden trying to expand its trade capabilities in the AI or other technological areas?
Yeah, no, that's a good one, and of course, services, digital services, and the AI and all that, extremely important for us to be competitive. And if I would have had another 40 minutes, I would have spoken about that at length. So I sort of got stuck with all the commodities. But clearly, this is a challenge for all our societies to be part of the digital development. And so far, it's been working out pretty fine for Swedish companies. You saw Spotify, for instance, as one example. Ericsson, the 5G and all the telecom infrastructure, very important here, actually, in the United States as well. So we have had that tradition of being adaptive to new technologies. But AI, we'll see.
I couldn't help but stop, because that's my brother-in-law.
Ah.
So if he wanted to ask, like your wife, acknowledge brother-in-law, acknowledge, and then
Okay.
I'll ask question.
Thank you so much for being here. It's really well done. My question for you is, you've talked about the history of Sweden trading in the Baltic area over a very long period of time. And if you could really just get granular on a specific time period within that time frame that really sets Sweden apart from maybe the other countries in the Baltics as a very powerful trading partner to many nations. What time frame or what specific time would that be?
Yeah. Very good question. I think it boils down to the gentlemen there, the inventors in the end of the 1800s. You had a huge migration from Sweden because it was very poor then. 1/4 of the population moved to the United States and seek their happiness here. One family, the Nordstrom family, who moved to Seattle, for instance, but there are many other families who did that. But that time, when we came up with these inventions, then that was base for many successful companies that you still see today, like the Laval, the separator, and some of the other inventions. I think that's the thing. And then there was a huge economic reform in terms of, that's when Sweden understood that free trade is the answer to our success. And the National Board of Trade that was formed in the 1600s, it was a lot about tariffs and quotas, but then in the 1870s it's changed totally. So that's why the National Board of Trade is still very active, and they provide research and reports why free trade makes sense, and to have this trust in sort of the economic environment. And that's why we are free trade fundamentalists, because in the end of the day, what is good for a neighbor is also good for you. Trade is not a zero-sum game in our view, and we all benefit from innovation in the end of the day. So, yeah.
Thank you. This has been an absolutely extraordinary